It's my pleasure to introduce Tom Shepard, who's going to moderate our industry panel conversation. Tom retired from Driscoll in 2021 as Vice President of Logistics, and he previously worked at Fresh Express for 24 years in several senior logistics roles. And I know you've got a couple of great panelists, so I'll turn it over to you, and we'll all look forward to hearing what your group's got to say. Tom, welcome.
Thanks, Dennis. It's great to be here. And Kevin, thanks for your remarks. And by the way, for the audience, Kevin is a great leader and just a real pleasure for me to have had the opportunity to work with him for many years. So today we are going to follow up on Kevin's remarks. So we're going to drill down a little bit and really kind of focus on the perishable aspect of some of the supply chain opportunities that are out there. So I want to start by introducing the other panelists that are going to be joining me. First off, I want to introduce Sandor Nagy. Sandor has been with Driscoll since 2017, and he's the Chief Operating Officer of Driscoll's of the Americas. In this role, Sandor leads the end-to-end operations, which includes nursery in the U.S. and Mexico, production, which includes over 700 independent growers across the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, and supply chain. That's for supply forecasting, order fulfillment, quality, sourcing, distribution, transportation, food safety, as well as that's pretty much the kitchen sink. So Sandor is front and center and just a large part of the overall Driscoll operation. Also on our panel is Matt Amaral, and Matt's another individual I've known for a long, long time, and he's the Vice President of Post-Harvest at Diorigo, California. He's worked in the produce industry for 25 years, where his responsibilities have ranged from new product development, raw product procurement, commodity sales, and business development. And Matt's been in his current position now for the past 5 years. Kind of follow up now in the introduction. What I'd like to do is just give both Sandor and Matt an opportunity briefly just to tell a little bit about Sandor, a little bit about Driscoll's, and as well as Matt, maybe make a couple comments about Diorigo. So Sandor, I'll let you start.
Okay, I think I'm on, Tom. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. It's a real honor to spend some time with you and share our insights on supply chain. Driscoll's is a over 100-year-old company that operates globally, and our core business is fresh berries. We have 4 products: strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, and blueberries, both in conventional and organic. And our business starts with developing the genetics and the varieties for high flavor, high quality berries. And our business goes all the way through to from breeding to nursery, where we produce the plants that ultimately we give to those 700 independent growers that Tom mentioned, that do all of the farming and apply the labor and the agronomic practices to grow the berries and ultimately harvest them. We receive those berries and then take them to market across a very large distribution network of over 60 warehouses. And we ship berries by pretty much every mode of transportation that you can imagine. And so there's a lot of science and some magic involved in those berries to market. And so that's what we do at Driscoll's.
Thanks, Sandor. Matt, give a brief introduction to Diorigo.
Yes, thank you very, very much for having me part of the panel. I appreciate it. Looking forward to discussing the supply chain. Diorigo Brothers California is a 99-year-old company, family-owned company that is headquartered in Spreckles, California. It's currently being led by John Diorigo, who is a third-generation Diorigo family member. We're a vertically integrated grower shipper that grows 11 different types of vegetables, from lettuce to broccoli to cauliflower and romaine hearts, to just name a few. Being vertically integrated, we control everything from the land that is farmed to planting, to harvesting, to cooling, and finally to shipping of the product to our customers. We have year-round operations. During the month of March to November, we are located in the Salinas Valley, and during the 4 months of November through March, we are operating in Brawley, California, Yuma, Arizona, and San Luis, Mexico. So we deal with supply chain throughout the entire year with different kinds of ramifications that we have to deal with on each one of these segments.
Great. Well, as you can hear, two very different companies, aside one more vegetable, the other fruit, but the way they're organized and the business model, significantly different. But I think as we talk through here over the next few minutes about their respective supply chains, there are definitely some things that we share in common, as well as, some other opportunities and challenges that may be more unique to a specific company. But so anyway, let's start out with acknowledging that supply chains in any industry are relatively ignored from the outside as long as products flow through to the customer and consumer as planned. And I think this has kind of been the history. Supply chains was kind of viewed out of sight and out of mind until something goes wrong. I mean, the agricultural supply chain is no exception. But every day, fruits and vegetables move from Central California to destinations within the U.S. and around the world. It's what happens when disruptions occur that test the sophistication and preparation of a company or industry's supply chain. That's when things really happen. A company's ability to react and adjust during these times gives specific evidence and proof of the agility of their supply chain to meet customer and consumer needs. We must start the discussion with some specific experiences where the supply chain was disrupted unexpectedly, and how each of your companies successfully responded to maintain service to the customer and consumer. So, when things got derailed and we had something that really was unexpected, how did your companies respond? So, Matt, I'm going to start with you. If you've got an example there at Diorigo where you really had to step up in a situation that you weren't expecting and had to respond quickly to.
Yeah, thank you. First and foremost, produce and fruit companies were considered essential businesses. So we are supplying food to the entire world. So we have to take that responsibility and make sure that we're able to adapt to any kind of situation to make sure that we are continually providing consistent supplies to customers throughout the world. To do that, we have to be able to adapt, but we also have to have an underlying strong process and procedures that we follow that allow us to adapt to these unforeseen situations. So two right off the top of my head is the first is the pandemic, which everybody is aware of and we've had to gone through over the last couple of years. Being an essential business, we had to find a way to continue to get our produce harvested, cooled, and shipped to our customers. So to do that, we had to have a roundtable internally very quickly to figure out a way to have our 1,500 employees out in the field and over 200 employees in the cooler to continue to keep that flow going so that we can get that produce on trucks and to our customers. So we had to talk about social distancing. We put protocols in place for masks. We actually had wash stations established throughout the facility, limited driver access into the cold box. We did a lot of different things to get that produce to our customers. And yes, it did cause a little disruption, but ultimately we were able to get that produce from the fields to our customers. And then the second example, with the unfortunate occurrence here back in the spring with the Taylor Farms fire at their cooler, which destroyed their facility for food service, John Diorigo reached out to Bruce Taylor to keep them moving and keep them able to provide produce to their customers. So what we were able to do, the two companies got together and we had to look at the logistics. We had to understand what Taylor Farms needed from Diorigo in terms of cooling, shipping, and storage space. And then we had to bring it back in and understand how that would affect our internal processes. So that's where that internal processes are very important, where we can still go out and help others and do other things, but we're still relying on our core processes that we have in place. So in doing that, we were able to assist them, and we were just one spoke in the wheel that they did to make sure that they created seamless supplies to their customers.
Yeah, I think both of those are great points, Matt. Certainly with Taylor Farms, that was just an horrific event that right at the time when they were getting ready to open up in Salinas for the season, and to be able to count on companies like Diorigo to help out and help minimize, or at least help to manage that situation in a way that would allow Taylor Farms to get through that until they could come up with a solution solution because it was going to take a year for them to get a new cooler up and running or get that one replaced and rebuilt. Within the ag segment, there was kind of a cross-functional supply chain support between businesses. And I think that was great participation on the part of Diorigo in helping Bruce and Taylor Farms get through that very challenging time. Sandor, I know that the pandemic created significant challenges at Driscoll's. What thoughts do you have on maybe some things that came out of that helped to underscore the strength of the supply chain within the company?
Yeah, to answer that question, I think it's important to frame the type of supply chain that we manage and operate within. There are supply chains for cars and refrigerators and electronics. There are perishable supply chains for food products. And then there are what I would call hyper perishable, ultra perishable supply chains. And that's the environment that Matt and I live in every single day. And no 2 days are alike. I can say that for sure. And that's what makes this a really interesting and exciting place to work and an exciting place to make your career within supply chain. I would say a couple things that we learned coming out of the pandemic, to build on what Matt mentioned, was that you've got to be incredibly nimble. And 2 or 3 examples I can share that I think will be really vivid to everybody. The first is one of our largest customers, top 5 Driscoll's customers, had a significant coronavirus outbreak at their largest distribution center, which knocked out their distribution center. And so we had to stand up what's called the direct to store delivery program within a matter of days. And we don't deliver directly to stores. We deliver to our customers' distribution centers. And here we were in the middle of the pandemic, having to figure out how to deliver to over 100 addresses and locations that we'd never delivered to before. And we made all that happen literally in a matter of days, and we were able to sustain that for a couple of months. It's that type of agility and creativity that's needed. Now, that's kind of a more extreme example. Smaller examples of those kinds of agile feats happen every hour and every day in our industry. I'd say another interesting learning or experience in the pandemic was just how disrupted the global transportation links became during the pandemic. Ocean vessels were stranded, airplanes were stranded, pallets that we ship our product on were not only stranded, but being hoarded by everyone. And so we had to do really unusual things like buy lumber to make our own pallets, or some cases we had to charter 777 freighters to ship product globally. So you do what you have to do to keep moving in this type of ultra perishable environment.
Great. Yeah, great examples. Thanks, Sandor. So let's move on to the next topic. So ag supply chains are challenged with unique aspects that most supply chains aren't faced with. And Kevin spent some time explaining that and getting into a little detail, maybe a little more broadly. So what I like to do with 3 of us, let's just discuss some of the components that make the ag supply chain different, the perishable supply chain different, as well as some of their related challenges. So, Sandor, you want to start this one off with your thoughts?
Sure. This could be a very long conversation. There's many things about the fresh produce supply chain that are really unique and challenging and very interesting. One of them is time and temperature. And for what I call a hyper perishable or ultra perishable product like a blackberry or a raspberry, maintaining temperature and the velocity, getting the product to market. We don't really think of inventory. Many companies are happy if they turn their inventory 10 times a year. I mean, we're turning our inventory 200 times a year. If we didn't, we wouldn't survive. And so the time and temperature, I think, is something really unique. And I think, there's also food safety related elements that I think are quite unique and different from shipping electronics or industrial products. Those would be 2 that I would highlight.
Yeah, and I'll just add on the cold chain, just briefly. I had actually had an opportunity here recently talking to a company about cold chain, and their focus was more specifically on how do you get product, how do you get perishable product to the customer and then ultimately the consumer more quickly. And, there's a lot of challenges are out there around just the transport now. The trucking side, there's a finite number of team drivers, for example, that can basically travel 24 hours. But I think what gets lost a lot of times, and it really is still a field that would benefit by additional participation and engagement, is the cold chain part. And people don't pay attention, I don't think, as closely as they should, to the fact that important temperatures are even more important than speed. And just as an example, you can set a pallet of fruit from California to Hong Kong and put it on a plane, and it's maybe 36 hours from the time it's harvested to the time it lands in Hong Kong. And if it's not properly kept cold, that the berries can look much, much worse than if you put a pallet of berries on a truck that goes to the East Coast and that temperature is maintained all the way across. So cold chain is just critically important to match up well with transport and getting product as quickly as you can to the customer. Matt, what are your thoughts on specific?
Yeah, a few points that I think are really important in the supply chain is the supply and demand, obviously. And I think forecasting goes hand in hand with that. And then finally, the wild card is the weather. What we do here at DRIGO is we base everything off of our customers' demand. And so what we do is we have a weekly number for each commodity, and our production department goes back and builds supplies and figures out where those crops are going to be planted based off that demand. For example, today, our production department is actually planning for fields that are going to be harvested next March and April. So we're a year in advance in terms of that. And so when we talk about supply and demand, those crops that we're supplying, those perishable vegetables, they're in the ground for 60 to 120 days. And so there's a lot of things that can take place that will affect how that produce is coming off and being harvested and the timing of that. So when you have a weather happening occurrence, a big rainstorm or heat or whatever, we provided a plan to get that produce on certain days of the week and certain weeks of the year. And when those abnormal weather events occur, it basically throws that planning out of whack. So there's a lot of things that we can control, but the one component that we can't at this point is Mother Nature. And so we have to be able to, in terms of our forecasting and supplies, we have to sometimes plant a little more. We know what times of year where it is susceptible to weather during our transitioning from up here in the Central Coast down to the desert area. We take that all into consideration to ultimately make sure that we can provide seamless supplies to our customers.
Yeah, good. And one other comment that I'll make on the challenges within the ag space is product visibility and traceability. Both of those components, from a food safety standpoint, knowing where the product is in transit and to the customer, and sometimes through even to the consumer, is becoming increasingly important. And, for example, just from a food safety standpoint, if you've got a truck moving across the U.S. and it's at a truck stop and somebody breaks the seal, opens the doors, you want to know that. You want to have visibility of that so you can take appropriate action determining what needs to be done with the product. And then also, I think everybody has heard on the news, there's a product recall. If there's a food safety issue with produce and there's a general recall or a regional recall, we all have heard the confusion at times trying to figure out where that produce came from. And it's a difficult proposition in a lot of instances to adequately trace that product back to the source. There's been a lot of energy, effort, and a tremendous amount of improvements in that area here over the last number of years, but that's still kind of a work in progress. And just the visibility at all phases and all spots of the supply chain, knowing exactly where that product is and where it came from, are both critically important within the supply chain in terms of making it a little different than what other industries may have to deal with. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left, so we'll try and tackle this and see if we can't get into a little bit in this third point. Tighten visibility of the increased importance of highly qualified staffing and industry expertise within the ag supply chain. I think that three of us agree that there is a widening gap between the talent needed and the current available resources. So let's spend a few minutes discussing what we see as the challenges and the critical needs within this space, and is specific to the perishable supply chain industry and the challenges that each of your companies are focused on in terms of priorities. So Matt, I'll let you start. We'll just do a couple of minutes each.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I think there's three elements that are really important to this topic. First and foremost is a corporate commitment. We need to make sure that the companies have a commitment, because it takes time and money to make sure that you create an efficient supply chain. Secondly, make sure that we design a network that brings together all the different parts of the supply chain, whether it's trucking, whether it's the supplier, whether it's the customer. We got to make sure that there's a connection between each and every one of those elements, because that's the only way the supply chain is going to work, is if all of those different links are linked together. And then finally, we need to have qualified people to run them. Tom, we had a couple conversations leading up to this, and you simply put it, we need individuals that want to know the how and the why. And we need to have individuals want to know how things are set up, why they're set up. And then we also need to now have these individuals that are coming into the industry to build on that current system and add technology and add new ways of thinking, because that's how we're going to evolve into the future. And if we're not getting better, we're getting worse. So that's where we're headed.
Perfect. Sandor.
Yeah, I would build on that, and I would simply say technology, technology, technology. It is everything we are doing within supply chain has a technology component to it. And we're using technology in ways for deeper insights into our product, into the business. We are using technology for better decision making, for better planning. And we're using technology every aspect of the business. So whether it's warehouse management, traceability, supply forecasting. And so some of the future ready skills that we're looking for as we bring on new talent is data science. And we're looking for individuals who have a very strong background in data sciences and data analytics. We're also looking for individuals who have a background or a passion for sustainability. And we didn't talk very much today about that. I will emphasize that just briefly. So much of what we are doing now is driven by being better stewards of the environment and the resources that we have, and the communities, and being better neighbors in the communities where we operate. So sustainability in terms of energy usage, sustainability in terms of transition away from plastics, and driving efficiency in every aspect of our business. So those are some areas that we look to bring on new talent: data science and sustainability.
Great. Okay, well, we'll transition now to questions, and I'm looking online here. And first question, what is the most difficult part of supply chain management? I'll start with that. And when you get involved in supply chain, it can be an all-consuming thing. Within the ag segment, we're in a 24-hour world, and we're not shifting inventory from one place to another. And then once it's set up, we're going to live off that inventory for a while. Every day, every hour, and sometimes every minute can present itself with different degrees of challenges. The rewards are there, as well as some of the pain. It's kind of hard to turn off. Well, once it's kind of in your blood, I think for a lot of people, that's just being able to establish that work-life balance, I think, is critical. And I think in supply chain, it's even more of a factor if you're going to be successful in the long term. Sandor or Matt, anything you'd like to add? What are in terms of your thoughts?
I think what is most difficult about supply chain is also, in some ways, ironically, the most rewarding. And that is that we deal with significant uncertainty. Almost every day is different from the previous. And that can be incredibly frustrating and incredibly taxing and stressful. At the same time, it makes supply chain, I think, one of the most interesting fields to work. And so it is both a blessing and a curse.
Yep. Here's one. It's just a comment. You mentioned helping Taylor Farms after they had a fire. I think, Matt, this is kind of more directed towards you. What an amazing community we live in. would just completely underscore that. Certainly Taylor Farms has done a lot for the Salinas community. They've done a lot for CSUMB. It was really an opportunity as an industry and as a community to really stand beside them as they were going through this. It was an opportunity for a lot of people to give back and recognizing what Taylor Farms has done in terms of their ongoing support. The next question, how much do supply chain managers make yearly on average? Probably a lot of people would say, well, probably not enough, but the exciting time that we're in now is that when I got into the business a long time ago, people that were working, say, in logistics, transportation, distribution, and just some of the supply chain jobs, a lot of those, they were entry-level jobs with people that had aspirations of really climbing to the top and getting into sales. They weren't really considered career roles. And so when I came back to California, I was a bit of an enigma because I got my degree was in transportation logistics. What I've seen over the last several decades now is that pendulum has really swung. And now there's a realization of the importance of a level of expertise and knowledge and industry savvy within supply chain. It's really been identified as a critical need. And so the people that are now getting into this space, I think, are in a much better position from a salary standpoint, because a lot of the ag companies recognize the importance and the need to have qualified people to help run that portion of the business. It's kind of difficult for me to throw out a number, but I will say there are a lot of people within supply chain now that are making a very good livings and have established very rewarding careers in supply chain.
Yeah, and to that point really quick, Tom, supply chain, you're touching so many different aspects of the business in terms of the buyer, the seller, the companies, the inputs. Your knowledge is well-rounded, and as you gain that knowledge of all the different inputs in the supply chain, you become that much more valuable to the company and the industry as a whole.
Yep. There's kind of a follow-up question about the data analysts. How much would they make yearly on average? And I think, it's kind of the same thing. When I was at Driscoll's, we brought in CSUMB graduates that have been very active as data analysts and been very successful. And in some instances, that's opened doors within the company and under other departments and other individuals that really chose to stay within that, work within that framework. So again, Driscoll's and others are paying for data analysts, I think very competitive. And certainly it's an area of the business that has gotten a lot of attention, and I think people are being appropriately compensated. The next question is, what is the software needed in supply chain management? I think probably I'll defer that to the next panel, because I know that all of us have had opportunities to work with various software companies and have been in some pretty major implementations, but I think that might be a question that might be best served the next panel and answered. So this one I might have a hard time. And Sandor, I'm not sure if you or Matt tackle this or not, but I'll read it anyway. Is there a relation between the current supply chain issues and the even larger wage gap with farm workers and H-2A workers? If so, how can your company specifically find alternative ways to increase farm workers' wages without negatively affecting consumer prices? Sandor, is that one that you want to?
Yeah, that's a really broad topic that I would say Kevin touched on the labor challenges in supply chain. It is availability of labor, and we are so critically dependent on guest worker programs in the US, and by the way, same for Canada as well. And so we've seen in the last number of years where that can get extremely politicized, which is unfortunate, because the reality is that most of the fresh produce, at least that I can speak for, is harvested using labor that has immigrated to the US, or they're on a defined worker program. And it's so vital that we appreciate that and understand that and make those programs work effectively. There have been some recent studies on farm worker wages actually rising faster than non-farm wages. The Wilson Center recently did a study on that. It's a deep topic. It's got a lot of pieces to it. Matt, if there's anything else you would add to it, I know you are, this is something I'm sure is top of mind for your organization.
Yeah, You pretty much covered most of it, Sandor, and we do have a committee, a group that handles most of those negotiations and labor issues. So yeah, I don't have anything else to add to what you stated.
Okay, so we are about out of time. There's one question left and I'll just answer it briefly. What are some of the local companies in the supply chain industry doing to recruit and encourage women to join the industry? So the comment I want to make is that right now the doors are wide open from my perspective for women. And for example, at Driscoll's, the director of logistics is a woman, and she's a superstar. The director of logistics at Dole is a woman, and she's a superstar. There are plenty of opportunities for women, I believe, in this space to not only get their foot in the door, but be wildly successful. And I think that women have just been very, very successful and will continue to be successful in helping to shape the perishable supply chain world within the ag segment and do an outstanding job. So Sandor, thank you very much. Matt, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to share this time with you. And so now I'll turn that back to Dennis and give this back to you.